Alright guys, what's going on? It's Sunday. It's really late here. I planned on getting this video out a little bit earlier. Um, Also, first time doing my face cam again. Haven't done this in a little bit. Got a green screen too, so I've been trying to figure out how to get this thing working. But yeah, welcome in, welcome in. For those of you that are new, I feel like this is one of the more valuable parts of kind of the service that I offer. Being able to go over my thought process, just walk through why I'm looking at particular setups or trades, the strike that I'm looking at, the expiration I'm looking at, etc. And just giving you really well thought out, planned ideas that I'm going into the week with. Obviously, these can invalidate or play out within that duration, right? We only have 5 days to work with. And as they play out or invalidate, I'll add new names that come in throughout the week. But yeah, this is the weekly scan. That's what I like to call it, or the weekly watch list. I just kind of fluctuate between the two. But yeah, I already put out a small little bit on it. Let's go ahead and jump into the first one, right, which is going to be Google. Google's number one. If you guys can't see either, let's show you guys real quick. I might have to move my head. So you guys can see my watch list is pretty in depth, I would say. I have just overall market sentiment. I do have to sneeze one moment. Okay, we're good. I usually look at just like VIX, right? The dollar. I look at obviously bonds slash yields. I'll look at futures, right? Just NQES are the main two that I like to focus on. SPY QQQ. Obviously, I have tech, right? Oil, financials, healthcare, growth, and I just kind of pull in and out of certain growth names. I had Roku on here and a couple others. Just kind of move them in and out, just depending on how the weekly or the daily looks. And this is what I'll do every single night, right? Every single night I'll go through the daily. At the end of the weeks, I'll go through weekly charts. I'll move my head back over here really quick. Actually make myself a little bit smaller. Everyone knows what I look like. But yeah, that's pretty much it, man. I really just kind of go through these names individually every single night and every single week. And I landed on Google. I think Google is a really solid chart setup. Let's get rid of this. I don't really care about this too much. We can talk about this though, right? Volume by price, just where a lot of price action is built up. You guys hear me talk about, like sell walls building up in terms of sellers setting the ask at certain levels and building walls. Same with bidders, right? And you can visually see this with volume buildups. This is a great tool, the volume by price. You can see here visually that we have a lot of consolidation from over here back in like early May, making its way to the gap up, right, that we just filled currently back in like here in July. You guys can see we have like, kind of like a bearish Harami, but Harami, right, is almost like an indecision candle. So this is really up for grabs, if you will. I think if we do slip underneath this low here on the daily, right around 120, I do think we slip a little bit further to this unfilled gap down here, right? This hasn't been touched yet, 117.71. Below that, we could slip into this even further gap down here at 114 to 112. We'll just round that up to 113 though. And yeah, I mean that could potentially happen. I do like the indecision here though. I think this could give a potential catalyst for this to move back up. Well, we can just hide this really quickly, right? We obviously can see that we're trending underneath our EMAs, right, pretty heavily. We have this massive earnings gap. Volume has subsided quite a bit too after the sell-off. Mind you, it's only been a couple days. It hasn't been anything super crazy, but you guys can see visually here. Second, yeah, all my colors are off. Visually though, I mean, yeah, you guys can see volume has gone down as the stock has gone down as well. So buyers are losing a little bit of that sell pressure. You're starting to see the candle now form into somewhat of a hammer on the daily, but once again, that bearish Harami is visible here with the 2-bar setup. So really, man, we can just hide these really quickly. Don't want to take up too much of your time. Looking for this gap that just got filled to either act as resistance, right, for scenario 1, where we push up, hit, sell here, maybe low day, lower high, and then push down and hit this lower gap. I'll make this white really quickly so you guys can see. On scenario number 1. Remember, just point of interest though is 123.15, right? So this is scenario 1 that could play out. It just depends on how the market opens up tomorrow. Or scenario number 2 is we open above this level, we come down, hit, trade into the gap, maybe hold the gap, right, and then push back up. And really, this is the scenario that I want. I think this name is a little bit oversold, especially for beating earnings. I know the cloud name, just the word cloud right now, and especially if you're not hitting numbers when you're, I guess, getting revenue or generating revenue from the cloud, it's not the best thing right now. Hence, Amazon selling off, initially after earnings. They saved a little bit of face after the fact with their kind of mindset going forward and guidance. But I'm really looking for this to recover very, very easily. I want to see a break and hold once again over 123.15. If we can pull back onto that, I think that's A plus. I think we can definitely take weekly contracts. So November 3rd, we could even take November 10th. I think November 10th would be aggressive still, but not super super aggressive, right? We obviously want to be able to have some time to let this play out. I think this can reach 127.22. We also have to think about this too, right? If we take a look at the chart, this now has a gap all the way back up to, oh gosh, I got rid of the price. Price level will be 137.42. That you guys would 100% need a little bit more time to get to. Maybe December's, January's, February, March, somewhere in that realm. But for I think a quick weekly day trade, right, or just a quick weekly swing, 2 week swing, maybe November 10th, like I said, would be the furthest out I would go to still keep that aggressive exposure. I would be looking for 127 to 132 calls, right? Gap, right? If we look at it here, is 128.31. Gap fills at 1, or I wouldn't say the gap fills necessarily, I shouldn't say that. But a point of resistance, right? This major, a lot of people I think were playing this too, was like this somewhat of a flag pattern, right? Everyone was kind of looking at this little area here and really trying to time the flag breakout. We could use this as a reference, right, for what price could gravitate back towards, because I'm sure there was a lot of buy stops sitting underneath this 133.95. This is where I would look for price to ultimately gravitate towards. Of course, you do have the gap a little bit higher, but I would like to see this trade into the gap, right, and then make its way up to 134. This is longer term, of course. Shorter term, this would be the projection that I have, right, just breaking above 123.15, making its way and filling this gap here, potentially holding the gap at 124.33, which is the lower end of the spectrum, and then making its way up to this level here, right? Be that 128.31. I would be out of the trade. So that is my favorite chart so far, I think, of the week. This is going to be my main focus, just kind of throughout the week. If you guys saw last week, man, I called Amazon to a T, to a T. It was insane. And almost the same thing with AMD. AMD, I just ended up putting a lot of gas on initially, and then I think I got like 70%. And then as it, ripped that one day, I kind of took my eyes off of it, but it continued down to target. I'm not going to make that same mistake again, because last week could have been a 2 trade and done type of week, right? Could have just been Amazon, could have just been AMD. I'm not going to let that slip away again. So Google, main focus. I'm going to try to see this all the way through, either up to that 128.31 target, or if we can break into the gap, who knows what it can go to. Maybe keep a couple runners on it, maybe get like the November 10ths and just kind of see how that can work itself out. But that is focus number one. We'll go ahead and jump into chart number two. All right, so number two here, let's go ahead and jump into this really quickly. It's going to be Microsoft. Now, I didn't show the weekly on Google. I apologize, but the Google on weekly looks fantastic. It looks like it's actually going to move into a bearish fair value gap where we look ultimately to go short, but we can trade that long up into that level. So try not to get that confused, and sometimes it's okay if you do miss that long side trade. So don't overthink Google too much. If you look at the weekly, I'm not going to go over it right now. I'm trying to make this as quick as I can. But Microsoft here looks beautiful in my opinion. If we can get rid of the sidebar here, almost a picture perfect liquidity trap on the weekly over this little swing high, or I guess this lower high now, right? So you have your high, right, which this level got swept. And if we can just kind of, look into the past on the left side of the chart, or, our historic price action, we can see that this weekly sweep here, right, if we just take it from where the level got swept, we saw a 11% move or something like that, pretty close. And we're basically seeing the same exact sweep on the weekly here. I'm not saying an 11% move is going to happen from here, right? But if we ended up getting the same exact move, we'd probably get somewhere, I don't know, down here, right, down 300, sub 300, right around 300. I don't know exactly where it would be, but this looks good for the same exact weekly setup and liquidity trap over the highs, right, or at least the initial all-time high. Now we're getting a lower high, right, where it looked like a breakout and a break of structure that we like to talk about. we're getting the same exact setup. So if we can tie this down into a daily chart, actually, before I move on, let's actually look here. We have a bullish fair value gap here at 319.47 to 323.18, right? So we'd be looking for price to move down into this imbalanced zone, right, and go into somewhat of a discounted range for buyers to then ultimately decide if they want to buy down there, right? That's a better range to buy than be buying up here. Just makes sense for this to be a buy zone. If we zoom in a little bit here, right, we can just see how nasty this liquidity sweep was. Obviously, earnings tied into a little bit to that. It always makes sense, right? Just be careful with earnings. They're not just going to pump stuff. They're not just going to sell stuff. There's meaning behind everything. So this looked very pre-planned. You guys can see, the earnings gap up here with the high volume broke over, looked like a break of structure, and it sold down, retested, and then it sold down into the gap. So pretty interesting chart, honestly, if you ask me. But one thing I can rely on is the fact that we do have this break of structure that got swept on that weekly side, right? And now it's starting to make its way down to this lower zone here, right? We always talk about finding and being able to understand exactly where liquidity's at. We knew liquidity was right, at these lows, but we also understood it was at these highs. Now, the highs got swept. It looked like a beautiful break of structure here. It looked like it was good for continuation higher. Didn't work out that way. Where do you think price is now going to gravitate towards? Hopefully you guys can answer that. I'm going a little bit quick. It's 10:30. I'm trying to get to bed, so I apologize if I'm going a little bit fast. But this is the level that we're looking for this to gravitate towards now. It is already in that range, so typically you'd be like, okay, I'd be looking for calls here, but I do think this sweeps underneath these lows here, right, and makes its way, like I said, into that bullish fair value gap and starts to sweep out a lot of these stops here. There's buyers that have stop losses just below. I don't know how deep they would be. I can assume maybe 5-10% or so. This is options. I have no idea what they would be on an equity trade, right? If they're trading shares, but I would be looking for it to push down and fill the weekly fair value gap. Let's keep in mind too, we also have a daily right here between the white line and the green line. So two separate ranges that we can look for Microsoft to trade down into. I think there's a lot of juice in this too, especially considering that weekly did get swept. There's probably a lot of buyers that were looking to buy this spot right here, guys. I'm telling you. So these could be the best the best trades is a false breakout or a false breakdown, and especially on the higher time frames. Once they start to validate, this could be a sweet spot. One thing that I did want to mention, that if this does retrace and the buyers do catch this level, I'm not looking to really long this. I'm actually looking to short this little mini fair value gap here. I think this would be a fantastic entry on either a 1 hour or a 15-minute time frame to see if we can catch that and then catch the flush all the way back down, right, to kind of take out this buy side. But if this does break under buy side, right, underneath this level here, you guys should kind of know the drill by now, right? We'd be looking for, and I don't know how to really draw this, right? I would be looking for maybe like a break, retest, and then go. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, but something like that. This can be taken potentially on a break under a previous day low, right? So something underneath 328.40, I think this is viable. There's a couple different scenarios for this. My preference, though, if you guys do kind of know how I trade, and it does seem inverse for a lot of people, and I get that, will be a push back up in a 337.62, a rejection, some kind of hourly or 15-minute fair value gap, or just some kind of imbalance candle, right? Just something for us to work with where it can, give us a potential retest on quick price action, be able to get that retrace, be able to get short on that, and then make its way down. So perfect entry would be up here. If not, I might be comfortable taking it 328.40. Obviously, less size is required down here. It's because it's a little bit riskier going into this buy side liquidity. But if it does work, right, we'd be looking for a move, probably down. Like I said, it's hard to say. I would say the weekly fair value gap right around here, right, like 319, 320. That'd be the full move that I'd be looking for. So that is short setup number 2, probably my favorite short setup. We can jump into Netflix next. Netflix, I'll just go ahead and preface it really quickly, is a two-sided setup. I either going to be looking for it long based on certain criteria or short based on certain criteria. These aren't my favorite trades. I'll go ahead and say that. So these are by far my 2 favorite this week. Obviously, as Apple plays out, a couple other names play out, I'll be looking for IV Crush. We are swinging AMD. There's Tesla that I'm swinging as well, but those are light size, so I'm just kind of picking and choosing when I'll add on those, and we'll see how those turn out. But I do want to talk about 2 other names really quickly. Netflix is the first one, and then we'll look at one other. All right, so Nvidia is a huge one for me. Oh, whoa, no, Nvidia is last. I'm sorry. We won't edit that out. Let me get some coffee real quick though. But yeah, Netflix. If you guys want to take a look at some of the levels here, it's a little bit difficult, I will say. This is why I said it's not my favorite. It's two-way. So if you guys want to put this to the back burner, totally get it. It's not my favorite. But yeah, man, this is I think this is too good to ignore. I was looking at this on Saturday and Friday. Just the earnings gap up, man. I mean, it looks like a peg, right? But I'm wondering if the peg can be defended. If you guys don't know, peg is not what you think. It's Power's earnings gap, right? So if you have a very, very large gap up or gap down, and you see some kind of consolidation where the gap is looking to be defended, especially if a large range is covered, right? Buyers want to control that, or sellers want to control the progress that you made, right? It's all about progress in the market. So this is a very large gap up. What is it, like 354 to 410, something insane. So I mean, you really just want to look for the last weekly pivot before the gap even starts. Okay, so the last major pivot that we're looking at is here on the weekly. So I'm a little uncomfortable right now. My back hurts. But we're looking for this little level here to get defended. Right, this is a very, very big weekly pivot. And you guys can clearly see by the daily wicks, it makes a lot of sense. We're looking for 398.15 to 400 to hold. I got wick through one time. This did a lot of damage, but closed above. Respected, broke above, right? And this was the weekly high breakout where it broke above the weekly high and kind of trapped here. What chart does this remind you of? Reminds you of Microsoft, right? So we're looking for a potential continuation to the downside, which is why I do favorite this short side. But once again, Power's earning gap, I'm going to be looking for buyers to essentially try to hold this as best they can. If we do lose 398.15, I think it trades at 388.70, right? If you guys can't see, I have already marked out weekly support / fair value gap. If we go to the weekly once again, right, we can just take this weekly, right, to this weekly. Remember, weekly fair value gaps, and a lot of people don't know this, it's a 3-bar pattern. 3-bar. You can't just do it for any other thing. And remember, fair value gaps, you don't want to trade every single one that you see because there will be a ton of them. We should all know that there's very specific ones that we want to trade, and those have to do with imbalances. And imbalances are created in the market through catalysts, right? Whether that be news, whether that be earnings, whatever it may be. It has to be something that is a catalyst to drive quick price action that creates imbalances. We can't just trade anything because you're going to get caught. Most of the time you're going to get caught because it's, can't just trade because we can find these on any time frame, 1 minute, 5 minute, 3 minute. You don't want to just trade everything. You have to be very selective. So we want to trade stuff that has been created, right, due to quick price action that creates inefficiencies in the market. That's what these are. So I mean, we have a power earnings gap into a weekly fair value gap just below. I like the downside here a little bit more, but I'm not going to put it past buyers being able to hold this little section here if they can. I like a move back to 410 and potentially back towards this level that was swept. And one thing, I don't want to be biased. Let's mention really quickly back on this date here. I noted as soon as it happened, Netflix sold off for no reason, right? I remember, if you guys have been in the Discord for a while, I mentioned this as soon as it happened, right? This sold off, no real reason that it occurred. A couple hours later, it got mentioned that the CEO or whatever said that they were raising prices, or something came out. I don't remember the exact news, but this happened for no reason initially. Okay, so this created a 1-hour fair value gap or imbalance in the market. I think there's potential that this can trade right up into. One sec, I'm trying to create a duplicate of this. There we go. The 1-hour fair value gap from 418 to 429. I think this is very, very possible. This also, just looking at this, if you guys are pattern traders, I won't take it away from you. It does look like it could set up a head and shoulders, especially if we get this bounce off 498 and pushes up to 410. This looks like a lovely 410 target. So, if buyers can hold this, it ends up kind of consolidating here for a little bit. I won't hesitate to pull a couple contracts and try to snag 410s, potentially even 420s. They're pretty cheap right now. I'd be looking for, obviously, the closer expiration is because Netflix can get a tad expensive. So be looking for that. But if this does fail, right, I mean, it makes sense to get a retest on this level because it is a very, very key level. So a retest would be, in play. So I would let this push down as far down as it needed to. If it gets a retest of that level, I'd look for the catch ultimately at 398, maybe make its way back down to 388.70, If things get really bad, you know, ultimately I could see maybe 370. That's a pretty far target, so I can't guarantee that, but you know, this would be the most conservative target I have is 388. Or inversely, right, if we talk about the long side, make its way up here, maybe catch a higher low, and then make its way somewhere here, pull down, and then trade into the fair value gap. You know, it looks something like that. So that is setup number 2. Once again, I'm not going to say this is my favorite setup. I try to, you know, I say it all the time on live trading. You do want to develop some kind of higher time frame bias, whether it's through a weekly or a daily chart, and sit there and focus on that one setup. You don't need to be uber focused on 2 different ways to trade it. You'll confuse yourself. You know, sometimes you'll go into a long trade being scared of the short side trade because you're supposed to play a rejection. You won't size as efficiently as you should have, and it ends up becoming a trade that you regret, whether you didn't size it enough or you shouldn't have done it in the first place. So yeah, this isn't my favorite setup, but it is obviously within the realm or the category of a PEG, power earnings gap. I do like the potential for both sides. Just, you know, it's a two-way trade, so that's what I'll leave it with. So if you guys do want to decide to trade this with me, excuse me, I would recommend lighter size, of course, but yeah, I do like this setup quite a bit. So let's go ahead and jump into the last one. This is going to be Roblox, and then I will tie it into a secondary trade because it's going to be attached to AMD. We do have exposure to AMD for earnings coming up. So this has also been a name I've been focused on for a couple weeks now. It's NVIDIA, but Roblox, NVIDIA, and then we'll get out of here, okay? Okay, so Roblox here, a fantastic chart. I do want to mention that I already have exposure on this. I did take some slight trims on it. I'm not as heavy as I should be, but I've been very, very adamant on every single swing that I'm taking. I'm starting light, right? I'm adding key daily or weekly levels, right? And I'm trimming, and then if it ends up pulling down to a level that I like or it looks good for continued upside, I will add into those. I've done that with Tesla. I've done that with, not AMD yet, but I've done that with a few other names. I can't remember what else I've done it with. Amazon. Amazon was another good one. But yeah, I'm looking for the same exact thing here on Roblox. I do have 32.5 calls already, which is essentially at this gap right here. So, oh, the wrong button. Essentially at this gap, we're looking for it to just trade into this gap here. Now, one thing I want to mention is this has beautiful higher lows. This has been building a very nice strong trend. Obviously, it started from a nice downtrend. It did come down quite a bit. But this looks like, and I've talked about this so much, I wish I had my old schematic that I put up a while ago. I ended up deleting it when I just kind of siphon through and delete some of my old weekly scans and daily scans just to keep things organized. But yeah, this was a beautiful Wyckoff accumulation. You guys can see the low here, right? We have this. I think this is the sell test down here in phase B, and we're about to spring out, in my opinion. We haven't really gotten. I think this might have been the spring here. I'm not really too concerned if it was or it wasn't. I do have shares of this. This and Rivian were the main two that I was looking to start buying actual equity in. But this looks good, man. I think what I want to do is continue to add into the 1117s. If you can't tell, at the bottom here we have earnings coming up November 8th. So we will have exposure to earnings. So I don't want to be super, super heavy because it is a binary event. I have no idea what's going to happen. Anything could be brought up. But just from a technical perspective, I do want to have at least a fourth of a position, maybe even half, and look to add. Excuse guys, I keep burping. This happens sometimes when you talk a lot on these things. But it's holding this weekly level here, right? And you guys should be able to see it's at 3061. You can see clearly as well that this weekly high got respected. Obviously, this candle closed and kind of almost faked it out, similar to the Microsoft trade, similar to Netflix. You'll see this a lot on weeklies, but the fact that this other following weekly candle actually closed above that almost gives me signs that there might be some kind of short squeeze that could happen. Of course, this candle here broke above and then also did a gap trap that we like to talk about. So initially I would be looking to short this, but the volume doesn't really say much. We have earnings coming up. I kind of already have the schematic in my brain of how this is going to play out. And I just want to see, right, this 3061 level hold on this weekly. Also, if we tie it into the daily, I'm okay with it coming a little bit underneath. You know, I'm not going to be super, super, I guess, tight with how I want to trade this. If you take a look here, we also have the fact that a couple dailies did close underneath, down to 29.85. I think I'm going to add in this zone here, okay? And really it's going to look almost like a small or short-term demand zone. If we can just make this demand, right, it's going to look like that. This little green zone is where I'm going to be adding those 11-17 contracts. Like I said, I won't exceed a half position, so this will only be about like I would say 5 to 8% of my account, and it's going to go into a binary event. So we'll see what ends up happening. I might panic a little bit, or I'll probably keep it in that 5% range. I don't know if there's a guarantee that I'll go to 8. But this looks really good to buy dips, in my opinion, down to 29.85 for my personal account, right? I'm willing to risk that. But 29.85 to 30.61, that 30.61 is the weekly. So we'll see if we can keep afloat above that. If it comes down a little bit more, I'll give it daily close below 29.85. But I am looking to add this spot here and then obviously get a continuation or a big move, whether that's through earnings or whatever, pre-earnings run-up could happen to get into this gap here. Upside potential is 37.08, and I think, man, I think there's a really big probability that this moves back up towards this, right? There's a ton of sell-side liquidity up here at 42.68 that was never closed above. I think there's potential it gets back to this level. That's long term. I don't think we'll have enough time on those contracts, unfortunately. But I do like, at least us getting up to 37 by earnings or, a little bit after earnings. I'm okay holding some exposure then. But 37 is my primary target, or just anywhere, right, somewhere in this gap. I'm okay if it gets halfway through. You guys might have seen it as well. If we take a look on the weekly, there is another fair value gap on the weekly. Goes up to 36.60. So if we go back to the daily really quickly, right, just slightly underneath the gap fill. So that might actually be my real target. Maybe hold a couple excess for the extra 40 cents, but somewhere in this midpoint, I'll probably take profits, and then making its way up to the higher, the higher tier of this this gap fill would be my ultimate target. But that's that. That's Roblox. We can take a look at NVIDIA really quickly. Just tie these two together. It's nothing super crazy. Obviously, AMD earnings coming up Tuesday/Wednesday. I can't remember the exact date. Let's just check it really quickly. I think it's Tuesday. Okay, yeah, Tuesday. So coming up here really quickly at the beginning of the week, we have FOMC as well. So there's a lot that's going to be controlling, I think, the big seven, right? NVIDIA and Apple. Apple moves the market, but NVIDIA obviously has a very, very large pull in the market alongside Tesla, Amazon, etc. I love the fact that this closed above this swing level, right? So you have this weekly level tied into the daily. And this is, I don't want to say do or die because I feel like that word is getting thrown around a lot right now. If you guys don't know me, I'm very much a fear buyer. I'm not really afraid to risk my money when others are fearful. This happened last year. If you guys don't remember, a lot of people were saying, Tesla was going down to 80 bucks, 60 bucks, 50 bucks. Nobody was, nobody was buying. Everyone was afraid. Meta was at 90 bucks, 80 bucks. Nobody was buying. Amazon, etc., etc. I can go on and on and on. And then these names rallied, and people were thinking it was a bear rally, and they weren't buying, pullbacks. They weren't doing anything. They were shorting it. The market goes on a tear, right? And then you end up hearing 6 months later, everyone was like, "Oh man, I wish I had that. I wish." I'm okay losing a little bit of money to see if these are the pullbacks that I think can send it for the breaks of these lower highs, right? There's these potential that these are here, and I'm not going to be fearful of them. If it breaks my level and closes under, I lose some money, and that's just kind of how my brain works. So I'm looking for this 403 to 409.80 to hold. If we can get a nice move, maybe get above here, close a daily above 409.80, which is that weekly level right around here. If you guys can still see, I'm trying to give you guys the best. Yeah, you guys can see that. Okay. A move above this, I'll look for it to trade back to 432.50. It's that simple. This is another weekly resistance here. If we go back to the weekly chart, right, this was this spot here, right, it did wick above ever so slightly, but now we have once again a bearish fair value gap. I think this is a good area to look to go short once again, right, between 432.50 to 443.68. I think this is a good spot to go short and maybe get a new low, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Why can't we trade this to the top? Trade it up here, end up taking it back down, retest, and then trade it somewhere down here. That's viable, but I'm not going to short in this little demand zone, right? I think it's silly. I think this is still a good opportunity, especially with I think there's so much bearishness in this chart, guys. Like, people just keep over leveraging. The amount of DMs I get every time I tweet that I'm somewhat bullish on it is ridiculous. People are telling me I'm stupid, that I should, dude. It's like an AMC, like, kind of cult built around NVIDIA short. It's really weird. Oh God, sorry if you guys heard that. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a good move back to 430 250 to 443. We should all know too. I've noted it a couple times publicly. I usually keep these quiet, but 460.95 dark pull print up to this level. It would be just shy of the lower high here, so this would still once again be in a bearish sell structure. But still, I think there's the potential that this can get some real movement, and AMD could be the catalyst. You know, uh, PAL and FOMC could be a catalyst. There's a lot of things that could really get this thing going. So I'm going to be watching mainly that 403 to hold, right? Daily close above 409.80, and I'm totally cool taking some exposure on this name as well. But don't want to overwhelm you guys. I'm not going to include QQQ or SPY just yet. I want to wait for us to get through that volatile event. I want to wait for us to hit FOMC, see what the Fed decision is, let the dust settle a little bit, and then we'll make our decision. I think it's silly to get ahead of that, especially knowing that we still have that small window of weakness with that repositioning or that rolling of potential short positions till November 3rd. Let the dust settle, right, before we start to put the gas on. Just my 2 cents, and I'm not trying to front run anything super, super aggressively. So that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Um, Nothing super crazy. Same exact thing I've always done, just to have a face cam this time. I'll start doing it this way a little bit more often. I feel like I talk a lot with my face and my hands and whatever, but hopefully I was able to get a lot of my points across. It's 11:14. I'm a little bit tired. Monday, I will not be trading. We have no news tomorrow, so I don't really feel like there's a point of trading. Just how it's been, guys. A lot of the market has been really trading around the volatile events and using those events to drive towards liquidity, whether it's swing highs, swing lows, or wherever it may be with imbalances across the market. Just because there's not a lot of liquidity, there's not a lot of volume. It's a record amount of number or record number of cash just sitting on the sidelines, right? Whether that's through firms, retail investors, etc. So um, who knows what will give us clarity for that money to come back. But until then, right, I think trading around news is actually probably the best thing. That's just how it's been, right? So usually a lot of the live trading and things like that are built around whoever's speaking or whatever data comes out. So nothing on Monday. Tuesday I'll be here. Wednesday I won't. Thursday and Friday I'll be live again. So Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, good to go with live trading. And then Monday, Wednesday, no live trading. So hope everyone has a good night. I'll get this uploaded, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. See you guys.